What's up, guys, and welcome to today's video and our new series where we talk about the darkest parts of history. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the real-life Squid Games, or more formally known as Brother's House, a time when the Korean government took those that were less fortunate and hid them away so they could look better in the eyes of foreign countries. So without further ado, let's dive right into today's video and the history behind Brother's House. So before I get into the history behind Brother's House, I do want to mention that this is a very touchy subject and it contains a lot of sad and a lot of dark history behind it. Obviously, that's the whole point of the series, but it also mentions and talks and has a lot of sexual abuse, trauma, and other things related to that. So if that subject matter or those things trigger you or make you upset, I would probably suggest not watching the video, but yeah, if you do want to learn more about Brother's House, enjoy the rest of the video. At the end of the Korean War in the 1950s, the Korean government really was striving to make themselves look better and overall improve how they were as a country. But they kind of had a not so good reason to do it. They didn't want to improve themselves just to improve themselves. They wanted to improve themselves so they looked better in the eyes of other countries. And by 1953, the government would pass the Executive of Duties by Police Officers Act. And this would allow police officers and other people within the government, like police officers, to detain and transfer those who they thought needed help. Meaning if someone appeared homeless or, as I said, like they needed help, the police officers could then take them in and detain them or arrest them. The whole thing behind this, the word appeared like they needed help, or the whole just appeared part of this is a very subjective term. And that meant that one police officer could see a perfectly normal person and be like, they need help. And the next police officer could see the same person and think that they're perfectly fine and they can be on their way. Just that not being a very it's just, like I said, a very subjective term. So anybody could see anyone and one person think that they need help and the other not. And this would actually lead to a lot of issues and just there's so much gray area behind that. And that was one of the many issues behind this act that was passed. One of the parts of this act was that police officers had to actually get permission from the individuals that they were taking and also let the family know that they were taking them. But the police officers very rarely follow this. They would just take them no matter what if they believed that they needed help. And as I said before, this shines a lot of light on and kind of foreshadows a lot of the issues that are going to happen in the rest of this video and the rest of the history behind Brother's House. Bro, I don't know why I trip up so much on my words when I'm trying to do this. It's not too bad though. During the same period of time, thousands of people, adults, and children were either homeless or left as orphans. And because of this, a large number of orphanages started popping up around the country, with one of those being Brother's House, which ended up opening its doors in the early 1960s. And most of these orphanages were being funded by other countries and other people in other countries adopting the children from Korea. And this was, I guess, fine and dandy, if you could say it like that. It was working good for the orphanages until the end of the 1960s, when funding from the other countries kind of slowed down and people from America or Europe or anywhere other than Korea didn't really want to adopt Korean children anymore. So the money stopped flowing to these orphanages. And from this point, the two timelines of the large amount of orphanages and the cleansing of Korea kind of merge, because the new president, or the third president of South Korea, Park Chung-hee, started pushing towards this cleansing of Korea even more. And by the 1970s, more and more of these acts, like the Execution of Duties by Police Officers Act, were being pushed and passed. And this was all done to, again, help clean up the streets, as they called it, and continue to and without other words explaining it, lower the overall population of homeless people from the eyes of people looking in and seeing their country. And one of these new acts that were passed was the Ministry of Home Affairs Directive number 410. And this directive would actually put more money and more funding to what they called vagrant patrol teams and forming these teams that would go around to towns and cities and wherever they could go and pick up anyone that they deemed as individuals that prevent a healthy social order in cities and society. Again, a very subjective term. Anyone could look at anyone and think that that person's a problem, while the next person thinks that they're perfectly normal. Again, just completely subjective terms. And this would lead to all kinds of people being detained and taken away by these patrol teams, which included homeless people, which was, I guess, the idea and the people that they wanted to clean up. But it also included children who were left unattended with like very little time. Like they would literally be like if you were caught outside playing with your family, or if you were caught outside playing with your friends and it was just a group of young children and this vagrant patrol team came through and they saw you, they could literally take you and be like you're not being watched right now. So they ended up just taking all kinds of innocent people. And other stories included, and real life things happened where people would be just walking around the streets, and like say you go to the grocery store and one of these vagrant patrol teams stop you and was like, do you have your ID? And you're like, no, I just ran out real quick to get some milk or whatever. And they're like, okay, well, you're homeless because you don't have your ID. And then you'd be taken by one of these teams or patrol people. And all these people that would end up being taken would be brought to brother's house. And one of the stories involving a situation like this was with an 8-year-old boy named Han Chung-sun. And him and his sister and his father were out running errands. And during this time, the father decided that, hey, I'll just leave the kids at the police station real quick so I can go get this last errand done real quick. And I don't know if this is like a common thing in Korea. It's not a common thing here, but he felt safe with leaving his kids at the police station for just a second so he could go run one more quick errand. And not long after, one of these patrol teams would end up coming to the police station and taking the 2 children. And both of them would like try to explain that, hey, our dad is just going to be here in a few minutes. Our dad's right around the corner. Let's go get him so we're not taken. But the cops and the patrol team wouldn't listen to them, and they were ultimately taken to brother's house. And as time passed, this whole idea of cleaning up the streets became even worse. And it happened especially, and it just ramped up when Korea started planning for the 1986 Asian Games, and also around the same time was the 1988 Seoul Olympics, both taking place in Korea. And because of these 2 huge games and all these countries going to be looking at Korea, the government pushed even harder towards cleaning up the streets and getting rid of the homeless population. And as mentioned earlier, the funding from adoptions had really slowed down for these orphanages. So places like Brother's House and other orphanages in the country needed an alternative way to make money. And thankfully for the owners of Brother's House, not for everyone who got involved with the situation, they ended up finding an alternative way to make the money. And this is through the Ministry of Home Affairs Directive number 410, which allowed them to switch their corporation into a social welfare corporation. And this meant that every person that they got from the vagrant patrol team, such as the 8-year-old boy or the guy who went to go get milk and didn't have his ID, or anyone like that, or even homeless people, every person that they got in like that, they would make a certain amount of money. So this meant that the more people that they brought in, the more money they could make. So this meant that Brother's House's new goal and whole point was to collect as many people as possible and pretty much become overpopulated. And if you guys know anything about asylums in America or probably other countries as well, I haven't really done too much history or research into asylums in other countries, but in America, the asylums were very overpopulated and people were put into very horrific conditions. And much like the asylums, this was also happening at Brother's House, where people were being put in horrible situations And to kind of get a visual picture of how this place looked, it actually had a large fence and walls around the whole perimeter with barbed wire and guards all around it, meaning that once you were in, it was very difficult to impossible to ever leave. There was also dogs guarding it, and these guards that were there had bats to beat you if you did try to escape. And this was all to keep innocent people from escaping the horrific conditions at Brothers' house. And while there were many horrific conditions that ended up taking place, I am going to mention a few. So again, if like these things trigger you, I suggest you click off the video or skip a little bit where I'm not talking about it. But one of the many horrific conditions that existed was the forced labor. And this is a very, I don't know, tip of the iceberg kind of thing, and it'll kind of get worse as I go through the different things that happen. But the people who were brought to Brothers' house were brought there on the idea that they could learn and actually become like an important part of society, not just a vagrant or helpless person. And they would end up being pretty much put in a factory all day long, go to sleep for a few hours, and just be put into forced labor camps and work. And some of the things that they made was pencils, and they actually were forced to build the buildings that they were being kept in as well. So just imagine building a building that you're going to be stuck in and you're going to be tortured in, and you have to build it yourself. That's what these people were going through. And like I said, that's the surface level, because on top of this, those stuck within the facility would often be beaten, drugged by antipsychotics, which the facility had purchased around 250,000 pills. And that's just what was like recorded, so it's probably way higher. And even worse, those within the facility, as I said, they were being human trafficked, and there was a lot of sexual assault, not only between the guards, but also between each other. And this human trafficking, as I just mentioned, could be traced back all the way to when the facility was one point an orphanage, and the facility would actually, like the 8-year-old boy, luckily it didn't happen to that 8-year-old boy in specific, but they would take a child off the road and bring them in and fake all their paperwork so they appeared as an orphan and that they appeared that they had no family. So then when a person from another country was looking to adopt, they'd see a child that they thought was an orphan and adopt them, but in reality, the children had perfectly good families and people in Korea looking for them. And it's just strings a big human trafficking thing where they would take people and children off the road, put them up for adoption, and send them to other countries when their family was actually looking for them. And they had no idea where their kids had gone, if they had died, and it's just horrible. And I'm actually now going to read a few stories and quotes directly from the people who were imprisoned by Brothers' house. So this is one of those direct quotes. 4 people came and rolled him into a blanket. They kicked him all over his body until he fainted, foaming at the mouth. People took him out wrapped. He never returned to the center. I knew that he had died. And that's from a man named Cho Seong-woo. And then this is another quote. People slept in zigzags on a small bed. Rape occurred every night in the corner of the dormitory. And that's from Han. Well, I just read a few of the stories. All these things were rampant and happened all over the facility, and thousands of people could attest and say the same thing. In total, it said that 512 people had died within the facility since it opened. However, this number is most likely way higher, and in more recent years, the number has gone to around 657, with bodies being found around the facility and being found in hidden graves, and some were secretly cremated, and on top of this, some were even sent to like hospitals to do testing. So this number of 657 is probably most likely much higher. That's just the count that they have on it right now. And this also doesn't consider all the survivors who will forever be scarred and have this traumatic situation on them the rest of their lives. And that number is way higher than 657. And looking back at the whole situation, most of the issues that happened at Brothers' house were due to Park In-kyun, the man running Brothers House. And he actually implemented most and many of the harsh things that would end up happening here. And this was due to his military background with different levels of command and different people within the facility being put on top of each other and having that levels of command kind of situation. And every level of this authority and level of command had the authority to beat and punish those under them. So this meant that if you thought a person was in charge and the top guy, he was also getting beat. And that just meant that this person was getting beat, and most likely to take out that frustration and that anger, they thought it was okay to beat the person underneath them. And it just creates a huge chain of innocent people getting just abused and threatened, and just a horrible chain reaction. And that was all due to this military level of commands kind of thing. And eventually this abuse and all these issues happening at Brothers House would end up making their way outside of the facility. It's not really known how, but it would be. And this would make its way around to the towns around and to Korea as a whole, with it finally making its way to Busan. And due to this, a man named Kim Young-woon would end up going to Brothers House to see whether or not all these rumors and things that he'd heard about Brothers House were actually happening. And once he arrived to Brothers House and saw the big walls all around it and the barbed wire and the guards holding bats, he immediately knew everything he had heard was true. And he would immediately leave and go report all of what he had saw to people, and this would end up leading to the facility being raided and millions of dollars and a lot of other things being found. This raid and finding millions of dollars would ultimately lead to Park In-kyun, the owner and person behind Brothers House, being arrested in 1987. And he was ultimately charged with embezzlement and illegal confinement. And with all these horrible things he had done and all this evidence of it, Park In-kyun was only charged and sentenced to 2.5 years of prison. Once out of prison, he would often visit his family that had disappeared to Australia, because many of them had also helped him with what was going on at Brothers House, and they were never charged, so they just fled to Australia so they wouldn't get caught. And as I said, he would often go visit them once he got out. And while that's crazy that they would let him go to other countries to see his family, and that his family never got in trouble with all this, what's even crazier is that Park In-kyun would actually end up getting back into the social welfare industry in Korea. Korea let him do this, and he didn't even learn his lesson the first time and ended up breaking even more laws. So Korea let him do it again, and he never learned because he only got 2.5 years in prison, and because he had no consequences. Like, I don't even know what to say. But like I said, he ended up breaking the law again and was caught in 2014 for a whole lot of things similar to what he had already been caught for. And again, just ultimately breaking the law. He was never charged for anything because he had dementia. I guess they thought because he had dementia, it wouldn't be like worth charging him. But he was just let to go free, which is just a crazy story. A man just treats people horrible, goes to jail for only 2.5 years, gets back out, opens up another thing where people are treated horrible, he breaks more laws, and then nothing happens to him. It's just, and even his family, they were just like set free. I don't know. Just a lot of crazy stuff that was kind of just swept under the rug, while thousands of people were imprisoned and sent to other countries and like trafficked, and it's crazy what happened there. And as I said at the beginning of the video, people often relate this to Squid Games, and many people actually believe that Squid Games is based off of this situation. But the director of Squid Games actually said that it's not. So I tend to believe him more than the speculation online. Even with that being said, there are a lot of strange similarities between Brothers House and Squid Games. And I'll put pictures as I explain these things, but the outfits, they both wore jumpsuits that were similar colors and one color altogether. And another thing that was similar between Brothers House and Squid Games was that they would take homeless people or less fortunate people off the road and offer them a chance to become better, become better, even though that didn't really happen. Like, they would say that they were taking them to give them jobs and teach them valuable things so they could be a valuable person in society. But in reality, they were mainly tortured, and just a lot of similarities to Squid Games. On top of this, there's also all the death, the guards being armed. While they're not armed with guns in Brother's house, they are armed and often beat the innocent people. They also all had identification numbers on them. So that's another similarity between the show and Brother's house. In Squid Games, the people were housed in a large room with a bunch of bunk beds. And that happened here at Brother's house too, where they'd have 120 people in bunk beds in one room all in a row. And yeah, just very similar between the two things. And it was also ran by, like, I don't know, these high up people with a lot of money, kind of just, I don't know, cheating the system to get more and more money and treating these people horrible. The difference is, like, main difference is that there was no money given to the people that were brought to Brother's house. Like, there was no incentive for them to go there. They weren't talked into it. It's not a game. It was real life. But other than that, like, there aren't a lot of differences between the two, which is weird. But again, the director of Squid Games said that there's no correlation between the two. But he did say that there was a correlation between another thing that happened in Korea. And if you guys want me to talk about that, I will. But I'll leave that for another video if you guys want. But ultimately, I want to thank you guys all for watching today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that it made sense. It was a lot of information, and me as a person and a bystander that wasn't involved with these situations, I can't really explain them to their full potential and full horrors and the horrific things that the people went through. So yeah, keep that in mind. And it's kind of hard to explain and get that information from a bunch of different sources in Korea. But if you guys did enjoy it, please subscribe. Also, I apologize for all the names that I pronounced wrong, because I probably pronounced them all wrong. So forgive me. Overall, if you guys enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button. I hope you did enjoy it. And thank you guys for watching today's video, and peace out.